Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Stoic Fellowship podcast. My name is Patrick Barry. I'm here with Kelly Rodriguez, my co-host, both members of the Stoic Fellowship board. And today we're joined by Michael Maune, who's involved with the New England Stoics and is also involved in the Stoic Fellowship. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to do this.
Yeah. So, do you maybe want to start off just tell people a little bit about yourself, your own background, how you got interested in Stoicism, and what experience you have in running and facilitating the New England Stoics?
Sure, yeah. I feel like we tell at the Stoic meetings, it's a pretty common practice to tell your Stoic origin story. So I've told this many times, right? Mine starts with an OCD diagnosis. So I was diagnosed with OCD in maybe like 2014, something like that. And I have people with OCD have like themes, which is what they obsess about and what they do compulsions, surrounding. So everyone knows kind of the cleanliness OCD. That's one of the themes, right? There people with a cleanliness OCD are obsessed with not getting sick and dying. And so they do compulsions to prevent themselves from doing that to an unreasonable degree. Mine was it's called scrupulosity. So being overly obsessed with being a good person or worried that I am a bad person because of something that I did in the past. I remember some of the stuff that was it's silly now thinking back on it because a lot of this stuff is it's irrational, right? It's a mental illness, it's a disorder. So it was like um I would I would be driving and I'd stop and get gas at a gas station. And it's something that you do automatic. Do you pay attention when you are paying for your gas at the gas station? You're probably not paying too close attention. So I get back in the car and start driving. And then I'd be, several miles out and I would be like, did I pay? I don't remember paying for my gas. And I wouldn't be able to get that thought to stop. It would just stick and bug me. And then I would be like, oh my God, I stole gas and I'm going to jail. They're going to find me because they have videos there and everything. So that's how the OCD mind kind of works. So how many times was I 5, 10 miles out from the gas station? I drove back and got a receipt. That's the compulsion. And there were worse things, but that was some of that was kind of what it looked like. So at a certain point, it got very bad. It was affecting my work. It was affecting my life. I was losing hours, days, weeks to compulsions and obsessions. And so I sought out um, uh, someone who specialized, a specialist in OCD, and I found one who helped me get better. And we did, what everyone is kind of knows is kind of the gold standard, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and specifically like exposure and response prevention stuff. So that's in the Stoic world, as I learned later on, that's the negative visualization exercise, right? Like expose yourself to something that you evaluate as negative, and then don't respond to it. And so that was how I got better. Um, was by doing that kind of exercise over and over again, and other strategies that I later on learned were, based in Stoicism or at least related to it. So that was the original start. After CBT. I'm sorry, I'm going on for a long time. You can edit whatever you want out of this.
Oh, it's
Um,
okay.
so after CBT, I uh, there was another part of this story that I guess I didn't think I was going to tell, but I might as well tell it. So I grew up as an evangelical Christian. That was my upbringing and everything. And I later decided that that wasn't for me. And in the interim, was an atheist or an agnostic atheist, I guess. Um, and I felt some kind of need for some kind of like overarching philosophy of life that I just didn't have. And when I went through CBT, that's when I had learned about that Stoic connection. And I was like, I wonder if Stoicism is like an option here for a kind of philosophy of life that would fill this gap that I've been kind of experiencing after I left my faith. And so I toyed around with it for a little bit, but I went, fully committed to it when I started reading meditations, and it was at a time in my life where I had made kind of a it was a mistake, a professional mistake that was not it was somewhat significant. It was a kind of uh, it was an email that was disrespectful and rude. I didn't intend it to be that way, but it was, and to someone that was significant in my line of work, and it was bad. And there were other things that were happening at the same time. I was having problems with work, and I was just like, what I'm doing right now doesn't work, and I need to reorient my life in some way. So I picked up meditations, thinking that this might be um, a, a potential solution to this, and it was. And that's when I read "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And that floored me. I remember where I was when I read that. I remember how I felt when I read that. And that was the fundamental shift in my life. I realized that I had made, mistakes, but the only thing I have control over is what I do now. And this is absolutely an obstacle. And if I try and run from it, that won't get me anywhere. So I have to go through it, and I have to commit to that. And so since that kind of experience, I've been kind of committed to the Stoic practice. It waxes and wanes, but it's always been. I know that I can always go back to it whenever I have a hard time. So I'll stop
Excellent.
there.
Wow,
That's
it's a great story. And
yeah.
then
Thank you so much for sharing. I have just a moment, Patrick.
yeah.
I have to say I have somebody in my family who also have OCD, so I definitely would like to have like more other conversations with you to see how you approached it, because something I've seen with this person is it causes so much suffering and it's difficult for others. As you said, these compulsions are irrational, right?
Yeah.
But it seems for this person, Stoicism hasn't been useful. It's like a way to find a solution in something the person decided it doesn't have a solution. It doesn't. It's not even possible to talk about a solution for this. So I will be really interested to talk more with you about this.
Yeah, I mean these mental disorders, there's, lots of different ways to get better, and stoicism isn't, always the best thing for everyone, but it happened to work for me.
We're open to it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, then you kind of got involved in helping to organize and run like a Stoic community. And I wonder what led to that sort of like, obviously you found Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy, the sort of, the therapy form of it, useful in your own life. What was the bridge from that to, trying to help facilitate it being in other people's lives as well?
Yeah, so to continue the story, I started practicing Stoicism. My introduction was what a lot of people's introduction was. I was reading the Daily Stoic, right? Ryan Holiday's work, and uh, And so that was my initial thing. It was going to be an individual practice. But I was working abroad at that time, and when I moved back home, I and at this point it was Boston. Um, I'm an academic, so we move a lot, trying to find different jobs and everything. Um, so when I got to Boston, I went to Meetup and tried to see if there were any Stoic groups because I didn't know a lot about this. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to, improve my practice, and I thought a community of practice would be helpful. So I found the New England Stoics on Meetup. I went to their first meeting. I don't know if it was that first meeting, but one of the meetings we had an exercise. It was during the summer, and we were meeting in one of the public parks there in Boston, and we had an exercise where we had to come to the event um, carrying an umbrella over our heads, but it was not raining that day.
Okay.
So it was a riff on I believe it was one of the Stoic influenced Roman senators, maybe Cato, uh, who would wear a cloak of an unpopular color
Mhm.
on the Senate floor in order to remind himself that he has no control over what other people think about him, and ultimately that doesn't matter. So I got with the group. I went to their Stoic. Um, they had a annual Stoicon. I went to that, and I was approached to see if I wanted to kind of, become more part of the leadership because I was coming regularly. And the group is interesting. It like we have a lot of new people, maybe like every time we have a meeting. And so some people come in, they see if they're interested. Some people, we do have some regulars, but we also have a lot of new people, and I was one of them that stayed. So I got involved with the leadership, and I helped organize a lot of the events and everything because I wanted to keep getting better at this, and I felt like the community could really support my practice. And I also wanted other people to benefit from this thing if they were interested in it. We're not evangelical about our stoicism. We're not out trying to convert people, but if you're interested in it and you want to get better, I wanted to help. So I helped organize a couple of different events. We're on hiatus right now, but we have regularly had kind of an informal meeting that's like we call it the Philosopher's Cafe. It's an open discussion. People come with questions about Stoicism. We talk about it. Um, and then we also had a practice class where we used a more formal curriculum. And we had been using the Handbook for New Stoics by Massimo Pugliucci and Greg Lopez, which I do highly recommend. I think that's a great book there. So that's kind of how I got involved in it. I got approached and I was wholehearted, committed to this. So I really enjoy uh, being a part of the New England Stoics. Has been a great group.
Amazing. So you were actually talking about the activities, right?
Mhm.
And this is very interesting. The one with the umbrella at Stoa Madrid, which is the group I run. We have done like walking barefoot, for example, but we do it
Mhm.
very early in the morning, so not to disturb it. I mean, I've walked barefoot in the main street of Madrid, Gran Via, Madrid. So, but we do it very early in the morning, and the practice was more than being in a ridiculous or being ridiculed by others, which we have thought maybe what to do, but it's difficult. What you do in Madrid that is, weird, like everybody, and I live in the city center, so it's very difficult to find something to do that is ridiculous or,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so we've done something like this, but it's very interesting. I would like you if you could maybe talk a little bit more about the activities or maybe some themes that particularly you saw that resonated with the group or with yourself, with your own practice. and maybe some activities you did that you would like to highlight, besides this one.
Sure. So yeah, there was the umbrella exercise. We had a lot of exercises that we did in the practice class. Um, and I'm trying to think if I can remember some of them. Um,
Or
I remember
maybe
uh,
beside this, you could talk maybe some teachings or practical exercises that were especially helpful. It
yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
have to be special, but helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of the standards, we definitely did do the view from above meditation. I still do that one from time to time. I think Donald Robertson um, has a really good version of it, like a recording that you can listen to.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm trying to remember, there are like two or three of them of those exercises. There's another exercise that we did in one of our other events called the practicum. And the practicum is kind of an alternative format for our annual, like, big meeting. Most STOAs have like a STOACon X meeting, which is more of an academic format, and the practicum is more of a small group focused format. So the talks are short and the conversation is long, rather than the academic format where the talks are long and the conversation is short. And so in the practicum, we had one exercise that was based off of Memento Mori, and it was write a letter to a loved one in the event of your death. And that really is a powerful exercise to help you focus the mind on what your true values are. If you were going to actually die, what really matters to you. And I found through that exercise that the Stoic virtues, justice, courage, wisdom, temperance, they mattered to me. But there are other values that I care about too that aren't part of that cardinal set or whatever. And I think that exercise is good whether you're practicing Stoicism or not. Those are a couple of the exercises that I think are really helpful.
Can you describe this practicum a bit more for people who might find this idea kind of interesting? Like that's intriguing to me. I'm trying to picture like what that like how that went. How did you all do that? Can you just describe it for people a bit more?
Sure. Yeah. So the practicum is it can be a multi-day event, but we did it for one day. And we decided to do it as a kind of crash course in Stoicism. So we um, we decided on a set of, I believe it was 5 talks, the 3 disciplines, desire, action, and assent, a talk on memento mori, a talk on a philosophy of life, and actually there was a 6th one. That was the first one, which is telos, the Greek idea of telos, which is what's your purpose? What's your end goal? Um, those talks are relatively short, and they're given without any slides or props or anything like that. It's just one practicing Stoic sharing their understanding of the practice with other people who are interested. The prokoptons, right? All of us are prokoptons, the one who progresses. Um, and so after each talk, we would split up into small groups, and there would be someone who was part of New England Stoic leadership at each. We called them tables, and we had cute names for them. Like there was the table of Cicero, the table of Epictetus, table of Marcus Aurelius, and you sat at that table. And in that small group, there would be different exercises that you would do based off of um, that particular topic. So for Memento Mori, the exercise was to write a letter in the event of your death. Um, for like discipline of desire, I'm sure we did one of these negative visualization or one of those, very common desire exercises, you know, uh, uh, break something down to its constituent parts so that you lose some of its power. I'm not having wine, I'm having, fermented grape juice that's really old, like that's what I'm drinking or something like that. So we would do those exercises and then talk it out. And it helped build a sense of community within that particular event. And it built kind of a personal investment in it. And we were agnostic about whether or not we wanted to push Stoicism. We said in the last talk that we'd like to encourage you to develop a philosophy of life, like actually write it out right now. It doesn't have to be Stoicism. We actually gave a number of different options that you could, consider or choose from. But we thought, the big thing here was that we wanted to, our big idea was to help build a community of practice with other Stoics and to leverage discussion and personal development over kind of an instructional model and see if that made more of an impact for people. And it seemed like it did. We obviously didn't do an experimental study or anything like that, but that was kind of the big goal there was to try out a different way of doing the practice rather than what we normally do, which I still think is good. Like I love Stoic I try to go to them when I can. This is just kind of an alternative.
Excellent, amazing. You explained it. I want to say this material, actually the guide for the practicum is on the website, on the Stoic Fellowship website. You can access there in the resources for people who are listening or watching this video. You can access it there. I read it, but now that you explain it, it's like in my mind, I actually picture how it would be. And
Right.
yeah, I think I'm gonna do it at Stoa Madrid and now at Stoa Brussels, which is the group I'm opening now that I'm in Brussels. I think I'm gonna try to do it and tell you how it goes.
I'd
So
love to hear it. I haven't heard that anyone else has tried it out. And we haven't actually done another one. We had hoped to, but it is a logistical puzzle. It's a challenge. It takes a lot of time and prep. It's not super expensive to put on, but does take a lot of time, mostly because when we did it, it was the first time we'd ever did it. So um, we wanted to make sure that the talks were really good. So we rehearsed all of them, maybe twice, I think. And we're also kind of writing the curriculum. So if you get that guide, Kelly's, thank you for reminding me. I was supposed to say something about that. But at any rate, yes, the guide is online. And if you are interested in doing it, it is all kind of laid out for you, including the bullet points for each talk. And those bullet points kind of characterize the three disciplines and the points that you might make in the talk. Obviously, you can adapt it however you want for your own purposes, but this is, yeah. So, at any rate, back to what you were saying, Kelly's. I'm really curious to see how it goes and how you guys innovate on it and maybe change it, maybe improve it. So please do tell me how it goes if you guys actually do it.
definitely. Yeah, actually, I am picturing it right now, but I'm going to ask you, for further guidance. Because I understand these people moving from topic to topic. So that's what I imagine you say is a little maybe difficult logistically, having the space and people
Yes.
moving, naturally and dynamically through the topics, right? So I will ask you for more. I have a question here for you, and running a stoa is a beautiful thing, right? So it's something that, for me, in my case, well, it has given me the opportunity to, improve my leadership and the way, I organize things. You come across a lot of different people who are all in the different, trying to get better and improve their character, but everybody's in their place, it's in their different, stages of the process, right?
Mm.
So which one would you say are the challenges or the main challenges you guys have, experience in running a Stoa? Maybe I can read the question here. So what have been the main challenges in leading a Stoa? And what advice would you give to someone who wants to start or strengthen their group from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question for this podcast, right? Like, how can we improve our stoas? Um, what has been our biggest challenge? I think for us, it has been kind of attrition, and maintaining consistency, maintaining the group um, together and everything. Everyone's busy. Even before our hiatus, it was hard to get everybody to meet. And I don't know that we have exactly solved that problem. I'll tell you a few things that we've tried to do. And some things that I think the Stoic Fellowship does that I think is worth modeling too. So we usually had meetings on an ad hoc need to basis. And there was a reason for that. We only wanted to meet if we actually had something to talk about. But the Stoic Fellowship kind of meets monthly. And I really like that model. I think that could help. And I mean that for like leadership, for people leading the Stoas. Um, and I think having a kind of equitable uh, workload for everybody is important. So trying to balance things there. Um, I'm trying to think what if there were other, yeah, the big thing has always been logistics. So we had like a group chat. And that's how we would handle like um, you know, uh the leadership would have this group chat, and whenever we need to make decisions or try to schedule something or whatever, that's how we would handle it. But I feel like it there are always problems with kind of text-based communication. And some you get misinterpreted or something like that, or um, you know, you don't take the time to reflect and consider an idea before you automatically lash out, right? Like practicing stoicism in our own leadership is also kind of a challenge. Um, and so I think maybe if I could rephrase your question, what do I guess what have I learned from these challenges? Not necessarily that we've solved all of them, but I think one of them is maybe being a little bit more conscious about practicing what we preach in our own leadership. I've certainly said things I didn't mean that were spur of the moment kind of passions in a text message because I could, right? If I had waited until we had our regular meeting, the passion would have subsided. I would have thought about it more rationally. And so I think there are trade-offs there. Um, uh, but definitely the big thing is trying to maintain these are small groups a lot of times, and trying to maintain interest and consistency, at least in our stoa, has been the biggest challenge. And I don't know that we have solved it yet. We've tried several different things, but it still persists. It doesn't mean that we give up or anything like that, but it's definitely something that we are challenged by.
Well, you speaking of your experience with this stoa, you've written up a guide for facilitators, right?
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about that and what kinds of what's found in that and where people can find it?
Yeah, so that's also on the resources page, the Stoic Facilitation guide. You know what? Let me back up on that. I think we have a meetings guide, but the Stoic Facilitation guide is something that's forthcoming. That's part of one of our education initiatives. And this will be coming out soon, just as contingent on like when we might be putting it out pretty soon and then having an event related to it to have people actually practice it. But the Stoic facilitation is based off of my experience. The Stoic facilitation guide is based off of my experience working in the New England Stoics, but also my own professional work. So I teach communication. I teach technical communication, and as I mentioned, I'm an academic, so I do it at the college level. And one thing that has become a big issue on college campuses, this is an initiative that I have heard many colleges are working on right now, many universities, is this need for students to learn skills for communicating across differences. Um, in the United States, this is a major push. I don't know if it is in other parts of the world, but having dedicated curricula uh, focused on how do you disagree in a productive way with someone? How do you learn to listen to people that you disagree with? Um, and so there's been a number of different initiatives that try to address that and offer such curricula. One of them is the Constructive Dialogue Institute, which is based largely on social psychology research, some of it by Jonathan Haidt, if you've ever heard of him. Um, and I use that curriculum with some of my own students, and it worked really well. And there are a lot of great strategies in there that I adapted for the Stoic Facilitation Guide. Things like constructive questions. And I think it is a very Stoic practice, actually. So constructive questions uh, are when you kind of pause your passions and decide instead of trying to win an argument, you switch your goal to trying to understand the other person's perspective. And you do that until you feel like you actually understand it. I think a lot of times people might, if you're in a political argument or something like that, somebody might say something that really upsets you. But I think our Stoic practice, encourages us to not completely buy into that anger immediately, to let it sit, and to not always believe everything that our emotions tell us, but instead uh, to recognize what we have in our power, which is how we respond to it, and to apply reason. So constructive questions are generally kind of how, who, what, when, WH questions, who, what, when, where, why, those kind of questions rather than yes, no questions. And there's something like, why is that issue important to you? Or, can you tell me a little bit about how you came to that position? Something like that. So those kinds of questions can be really helpful for continuing conversations in Stoic meetings. Rather than, agree, disagree. That's certainly one way that you can do it. You could turn it into a debate, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But constructive questions help you understand the other person and also help the other person work out their own thinking and apply reason. So that's some of the stuff that is in the facilitator's guide. I'd have to pull it up, and I don't have all of it committed to memory, but those are some of the kind of exercises that we talk about there.
Yeah, those are excellent examples. I mean, that is the kind of thing that, I mean, we talk about in this at the Stoic Fellowship, we talk about facilitators as the people organizing a stoa, and like that word can kind of apply broadly to all of the kind of logistical tasks and the choosing of
Right.
topics and all that, but it sounds like you're talking more specifically about, in the sense of being a facilitator, like aiding a conversation, right? This
Yes.
sort of like this art of walking people through or helping people to navigate these sort of like perhaps challenging topics or moments when people aren't quite seeing eye to eye. I mean, it's nice when the conversation is just flowing and everyone's understanding each other, but
Right.
there are going to be these moments when either no one knows what to say, which happens sometimes, trying to prime the pump a little bit and get the conversation flowing. Or, definitely these are topics that touch on some, religious topics sometimes, right? Like some people might be coming from different backgrounds in that regard. And it can definitely raise issues that are the kinds of things you normally avoid at polite cocktail parties because they are
Right.
deep and kind of personally significant and perhaps contentious and can make people a little bit uncomfortable. So, right, like that you might have these moments of trying to kind of midwife this conversation through some kind of a, difficult part where people aren't quite understanding each other or really listening to each other. Um,
And
especially if someone is coming from a different kind of background that
yeah,
not everyone's immediately on like I get you, man. Like it might take
yeah,
a
yeah,
little
yeah.
bit of like help me understand where you're coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, but I think for Stoic leaders who have been there for a while, who have been practicing Stoicism for a while, if someone, if someone comes to a meeting, they want to talk about, Stoic approaches to whatever they're dealing with. They're playing video games too much, or they're having problems with anger at work, or something like that. There's a tendency to want to offer solutions immediately rather than trying to understand the values that are potentially at stake for this particular person. So I don't know if you guys have heard this phrase before. You were in a conversation where everyone was just waiting for their turn to speak or something like that, where no one's actually listening to anyone. They're just waiting until they get to say something. And then they make it about them or say, oh, yeah, that was like this one time with me. But like having these kinds of more constructive questions is, I think, a more pro-social kind of angle. I never really thought about it that way, but I think it does align with kind of that pro-social cosmopolitan focus of Stoicism. Not that, again, I'm not saying that you should always be doing this, right? Like at some point you got to share your own perspective, that's helpful, but making it so that it's not your go-to move immediately, I think can really build character in terms of temperance, um, and wisdom.
Yeah, that one about not just solving people's problems for them is, I think that one definitely comes up a lot. I know
Yeah,
almost every Stoa meeting I've ever been to has had some amount of that. People doing like, someone raises something going on in their life and everyone else is just trying to solve it for them, like
right.
this. And I think I learned way too late in life that that's not always the best way to
Yeah,
help that person sort of work through it, right? Like it's like, yeah, they could probably think of that objectively nice sounding solution also, but you know, helping like not jumping to this sort of like analytical problem solving mode, but just having to draw them out a little bit more. And there's definitely an artistry to that. So that's one of the things that is touched on in the facilitator's guide.
yeah. That's one of the practices. Um, So for those who are just listening, I'll try to describe the slides here. This is kind of a preview, um, but uh, in the Stoic Facilitation Guide, um, we talk about the role of the facilitator, conversation management, and dealing with difficult conversations. Um, And I think we've talked about the role of the facilitator stuff already. Our goal is to model Stoic practice, manage emotions and relationships between participants, establish and enforce group norms, and guide the conversation. And we can do that through conversation management, and some of the strategies that we talk about are the constructive questions. I'm trying to see if I can find where that is. Yeah, right here, the constructive questions. I think the other thing that happens sometimes in Stoic meetings is kind of digressions that get us off of talking about Stoicism. We had a member in our group who was very politically active, and they would often just bring things back to their particular political persuasion. They would want to talk about that rather than, Stoicism directly. And so part of the role of the facilitator is to keep the topic on Stoicism. And so we have this kind of guide for recovering from digressions, and how you can do it tactfully. So there's this kind of, let me see if I can get my laser pointer here somewhere. Thought there was a laser pointer on. Okay. Well, I'm just going to point at it. So the first move is kind of to affirm the other person. So you don't want to shut them down immediately, thanks for that contribution, or that's a good point, or something like that. And then reconnect. So pick up something from what they just said and redirect it back to Stoicism. So in the example here, I think the topic is the group is discussing cosmopolitanism. One participant says they disagree with the idea. The participant explains they don't like cosmopolitanism because they don't like a particular group of people, group X, because they're bad. And the participant continues to talk further about why they think group X is bad. And this is steering us away from the philosophy discussion. So a facilitator could say, that's a good point. People who are bad are the hardest people to practice with. Let's turn this question to the group. How have you tried to practice Stoicism with difficult people? So there's the kind of redirect. So you affirm them first because they're a human being, recognize and respect their contribution, then try to make some kind of connection between what they said and what the goal of that particular that conversation is, which is in our case always Stoicism, and then redirect it. So instead of asking the question to the person who's done the digression, turn it back to the group, and ask for someone else's perspective. And that saves the conversation from getting lost in a digression that could, have tempers flare or whatever. It gets us back to what we're talking about.
Excellent. Definitely is an area, a difficult area, right? How to manage the digressions, and especially when the group wants to talk about what is not being the focus of, or maybe there's a more, how can I say that? Maybe more common or more popular way to see it, and then you see, well, the time is also, we're running out of time always, right? There's a specific time and you need to get to a conclusion, right? So
Right.
I would say this is going to be like, I congratulate you right now, for this work you're doing. I think it's going to be really interesting. I was actually looking for a couple of quotes that came to my mind, in which you were saying, but definitely Marcus Aurelius said this, right? Like, try to enter in their soul, right? To understand really the other person, you have to like enter into their eyes and see it from their eyes, right? So
Yeah.
it really sounds really, really inspiring.
Is
I
that for
would,
meditations?
yeah, it's in meditations, but I cannot. I was trying to look for it, and I couldn't find it. And yeah, like trying to. So I think this is going to be super useful and super interesting. When you have it ready, I think we should talk about it in the monthly meetings, with
Yeah,
the
sure.
facilitators, send it to them first to review, and then we have a deeper conversation just with the facilitators. I
Absolutely.
think it's going to be amazing. Awesome. So maybe, well, you're talking about this, implementation in the stoas, right? Or in very practical. This is the conversation with you is 100% practical, right? So have you seen maybe in the groups, how other members of the group apply it, or maybe changes in the group? For example, at Stoa Madrid, I give you the example, in some of the activities we do, uh, not always, but it's relatively common. Somebody says, "Ah, this helped me change, this," or I quit once in celebrating the birthday of Marcus Aurelius. Somebody stopped smoking that day, and they are still not smoking. So that day, it was a volunteer discomfort. So the
Yeah.
person said, like, I'm going to, push myself not to smoke, and they did it. So, do you have any cases maybe like this that you've seen at New England Stoics, or in the groups that you run, or in yourself maybe, of specific breakthroughs or changes?
Um, I don't like nothing that I would talk about on the podcast. Like there have certainly been people who have where we've had difficulties as a group, and we repaired the relationship through our commitment to the virtues. And I think that was one thing that I recall. I, you know, this is always kind of an open question whether or not it works, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy works, but not all the time, not for everybody, right? Um, Not for every condition. And so I can tell you, like, I know one of our members, it was like 2 or 3 years ago, was talking about he was having problems with kind of like time management, and specifically like he just stayed up too late watching football or something like that, and he was using Stoic practices to get better at that. I think he solved it. He hasn't talked about it as a problem anymore, so I think that was it. You mentioned smoking, so I'll mention I used to vape nicotine. I'm on one of my numerous attempts at quitting, but I've made it longer than I have in the past. So I feel pretty confident about this one, but I don't know. It's an addiction, so it is a challenge. But there's definitely Stoic ideas that I'm thinking about. The decomposition exercise that is sometimes helpful. Um, and remembering the dichotomy of control. That was actually I realized one thing that has been kind of a helpful reminder to me, which is that in order to vape, I have to go to the store and buy it. That is a choice that I have to make. And if I don't buy it, then I won't vape. And so recognizing what is in my power there is has actually been helpful. I'm kind of lazy sometimes, and like that inertia is helpful. Like sometimes I don't I commit to not vaping because I'm too lazy to go to
Too
the
lazy to go
store
to
to
school.
actually buy it, right? Um, but it has been helpful for me in my own practice. I'm trying to think. I know that people have used it in our practice to deal with anger issues. I've certainly done that. Um, and I remember in a lot of our practice talks, we would have exercises where we would kind of share, we would work through a practice, some kind of exercise, like a negative visualization exercise or something like that, dealing with anger. And people would share openly about some of they're angry with people at work. Um, God, yeah. I mean, like other people's experiences, I've certainly heard them, but I don't remember a lot of them. But I know a lot of how I've used it and how Stoicism has worked in my life. The vaping thing's the most recent one, but the big one for me was a colleague that at work that I kept getting into frequent disagreements with, and I felt like I was being treated unfairly by this person. Um, and it wasn't all stoicism. It was other strategies that I was using, but certainly remembering the dichotomy of control has been helpful in dealing with this. Um, and I think one thing that we do as Stoics, especially when we're beginners, the goal ultimately is to have your character changed so that your automatic reaction is the wise action, is the temperate action. But some of us aren't there yet, and so in the meantime, we have to do kind of reminders, right? Like one practice that they have in the handbook for new Stoics is having ready at hands. Do you guys know this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did
So
it. Also, we used this material, this book at Stoa Madrid.
yeah,
So
Can you explain what it is though?
yeah, the ready at hand. It's a short phrase that you can say to yourself in a moment where you're being tested in terms of what virtue you're going to exercise. Um, and so going into these meetings with this person, um, I often was very combative. Like I wasn't totally harmless, I wasn't totally blameless in how this relationship deteriorated. But one thing that has been helping me is one of my ready at hands. I don't say it all the time, but I try to do something to that effect at the beginning of each meeting, um, which is this is super corny, but it is very stoic. It doesn't matter if you win or lose, it's how you play the game, right? This is an English idiom, but it is fundamentally stoic. Because in any given meeting, I might get what I want, the other person might get what they want, um, and ultimately that doesn't matter whether or not I get what I want. What matters is how I handled myself in that meeting, and reminding myself of that before meetings has helped me catch myself um, before I said something, rash or got too angry or something like that. I have like hang on just a second. I have a list of things that I do before meetings occasionally. This was a project I worked on. Some of it was Stoicism, some of it was psychological research, but I don't do this before every meeting, but I try to remember to do it before some meetings. And I carried this around for a while. Now I just have it above my desk so I can look at it. Breathe before every meeting. Remind yourself that we have a common goal. We're on the same team, and the other person has faith in you. Wait, don't interrupt. I have a tendency of interrupting. Suspend judgment. There's the big Stoic thing right there, right? And ask clarifying questions. I think those last two go together very well with Stoicism because, yeah, you got to suspend judgment um, about your automatic reaction is this person's unreasonable, this person's an idiot, or something like that. And suspending judgment on that and then using those constructive questions helps you actually understand what is really happening. Like our automatic reactions are not always right, and asking the constructive questions gives us more data to make a more rational decision. It's just makes so much sense. Um, Sometimes it's hard to do that, but if I remind myself to do it before meetings, if I have a ready at hand, I'm more likely to succeed on it because I don't do it automatically. I still need reminders.
Yeah,
Actually, you
that's
reminded
really
me
good.
of this is from Epictetus. This having these tools at hand. It's
Yeah,
like he says, like the surgeon, right? That goes and performs surgery on people. This person has like a all the tools ready at
right.
hand to use. So have your philosophy ready at hand and have all your all your tools to apply. So.
Yeah. I'm curious though, it's these examples of overcoming whatever habitual behavior, that you've, whether it's vaping or these kind of anger responses or whatever. Um, have you all in the groups you've been a part of and the groups you've helped run, do you all make much of an overt kind of thing about supporting each other in doing this kind of doing these sort of overcoming whatever it is, whether it's vaping or something? Um, because obviously we know how like stoicism can be helpful in overcoming these kinds of things. I've personally kind of waffled on with the group I help run here in Pittsburgh, whether to kind of make it part of the meetings, make it something we do kind of overtly, that people sort of kind of share what their kind of big challenges right now, whatever it is, and what they intend to do differently or better with it. In a way of like creating some kind of accountability, some kind of follow up, some kind of like in a supportive way, right? Like in a
Hmm.
how'd that go? And if not, try again and whatever. Because like on the one hand, it's kind of a nice idea to make that overt and make that a part of what we're doing. Some people react in a way that they say that just feels a little forced and cheesy and ham-fisted or whatever other food-based metaphor. Um, so I don't know. I wonder what your experience with that is. Have your groups done that, and has that worked well for you, or is it a little more informal?
We don't do it. We've tried to do it during the practice class. We would try to have some kind of like, we would have homework that we would do in between meetings, and we tried various things. We tried like a shared spreadsheet where you tracked your habits or whatever. We offered informal check-ins via Zoom, maybe like halfway through the month or something like that in the middle of the week. Um, this is what I'm saying about like having inconsistent attendance. None of those had any buy-in, honestly. Is a shame because I think what you're talking about is really important. During this particular vape quit attempt, I found like a subreddit of people just quitting vaping. It's not a lot of people there, but just reading that has been helpful to get just a little bit of encouragement. I know when I was in the throes of the OCD, I went to the OCD message boards and got support there. I think support in these practices is really important. Part of it, you get it from, these meetings, you get reminders about like how you can practice, but on the day-to-day stuff that you're specifically working on, I really like what you guys are doing. You said it's more informal, so can you tell me more about it? Maybe it's something that we should try.
Informal is another way of saying that we don't really like make a point of doing it unless it just sort of comes up organically, right? If people just bring
Yeah.
up the fact that they're kind of working on something and then like maybe it comes up again later in like just in a friendly conversation kind of a way, and maybe that's
Hmm.
enough. Maybe
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe.
It's interesting for you to hear that you say that in your groups that people kind of don't take to like don't respond well to that or something, or don't take to it when it's done in a, I don't know, too systematic or kind of
Right.
forced of a way. And
Yeah.
maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's just not cool or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe just letting it be informal is enough, that if you have this community where everyone is the premise is that everyone's trying to,
right.
live a little better and do a little better, that this sort of encouragement will just happen on its own without, the facilitator having to be too, overt about it.
I wonder if there's a role for the facilitator to at least like do a check-in at the meeting and say, anyone want to share about like anything that they have been working on with their practice, or challenges that they've been having. I wonder if that would be, that happy medium. Like the too systematic approach seems not to be working. The more if it comes up kind of thing, I think could work. I wonder if there's a way to at least prompt it. Not in a really systematic way, but to give space for it at least every week or something like that.
Exactly. I would say that's the key of the success of at least my group at Stoa Madrid. The key is that we have these conversations, right? This is what
Mhm.
people are, coming to. So I always encourage, in my case, I always encourage like sharing from what you're living, from your real experience. And all the exercises we do, for example, this week we are practicing a voluntary discomfort. So on Monday, in the evening, we have a meeting and we are going to discuss how it went. So the idea is that everybody chooses an exercise from what is challenging to them. So
Mhm.
when we share, we're going to share this really intimate or something that really, and I think it's part of the conversation when the group starts like, being like frequent and people start
Right.
like feeling comfortable with each other and stuff. And I think it's also part of our role, at least I see it that way in my role as a facilitator, to create this kind of friendly, relaxed environment so people feel, willing to share and willing to go deeper in there. It doesn't happen usually when I do the Stoic week at Stoa Madrid. This happens on Thursdays always. In the beginning, everybody's a little like, you know, uh, not very comfortable, right? And then on
Mhm.
Thursday, that happens when everybody's like together, like they know each other from, and they end the thing like the high schoolers basically, right? Like
Mhm.
loving each other and stuff.
That's
So
so
for
great.
me, it's key to this sharing from your experience.
Yes,
So
yes.
maybe we can wrap up
Sure.
our conversation here. There are actually two questions we planned to do to you. So maybe what does Stoicism mean to you personally? Maybe I was thinking it would be a good idea, and this is something I wanted to do when I planned the podcasts, way back. It's like everybody shares like a minute. In a minute, how would you, in a minute or less, describe or define Stoicism? And maybe we can make like a collage or something to have all these insights for everybody. So maybe you could do that exercise here with us and, you know, deepen a little bit in how Stoicism has influenced your life. You mentioned the beginning and your role as a leader. So what does it really mean to you? And if you could give advice to someone that is starting their Stoic journey or their journey as a Stoic, if you have some, I don't know, some advice you could give to them.
Yeah. Can you give me a minute to think about that? It's hard to
Yeah,
say everything
definitely.
in 1 minute. I set a timer here, so let me think a minute.
That's actually the philosophical way to do.
Yes.
To do.
Okay, I think I have an answer. Hey, silly kitty. This is Zoe, by the way, if anyone is
I
watching.
wanted to ask you the name, but I didn't know if it was the right moment to ask you.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
This is Zoe. She's part of my polis, right? You gotta take care of not just other human beings, but the creatures in our care.
exactly. Very cute, very lovable,
Yeah. All
like
right. So in
loving.
1 minute, um, Stoicism is about learning to die, for me. That's what I believe it was Cicero who said that. I could be wrong, but it's reminding me what the most important things are in life. That on my deathbed, um, I will be concerned about wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. And I will not be too worried about whether or not I got my way in a meeting at work or anything like that. And having a set of tools and a community of practice to remind myself and to help myself get better at learning to die, I think is what Stoicism means to me. There's 1 minute.
Nice.
You wanted to answer like for anyone who's struggling or whatever. I that one I didn't have a good answer for, but I think what Patrick said is probably what I would say. That if you're struggling in your practice, reach out. It is an amazing time to be practicing Stoicism. There's so many of us out right now, and so many of us are really supportive. There are groups all around the world, including digital ones. Um, and the other thing is that, man, you chose the right philosophy if you are struggling, because it is the philosophy that you are supposed to be able to practice in literally any situation, right? There are no conditions on this. If you're a human being, you can practice Stoicism. You don't have to uh, you don't have to be born a particular way or be rich or anything like that. Anyone can practice this. So I guess I know this is cheesy, but like don't give up. Like this can still be really helpful for you. And at the same time, not everyone needs to be stoic. One thing that I've learned from our particular community of practice is that some people are working out their own philosophy of life, and some of them eventually decide that some of the Stoic stuff just doesn't make sense to them, and that's fine. Like we have a very eclectic community. If you are interested in Stoicism and think at least some of what the Stoics have to say could be useful for you, I think that's the condition under which you fall under the tent of modern Stoicism, that anyone who is at least interacting with these ideas is part of the movement, whether or not you call yourself a Stoic or not. We have people at our Stoa who are Christians, who are Buddhists, who are many different faiths and perspectives, and those things are important to them, and I would never take that away from them. That's their philosophy of life. And Stoicism is kind of the eclectic, smorgasbord that we all kind of draw from. And yet, for me, it has been very centering. It helps me remember what is the most important. So I guess the last thing I would say to anyone who's struggling is, yeah, don't forget what your values are. Don't forget what your most important things are. And if it's Stoicism, great. And if it's not, yeah, find something new.
Very well said. Thank you,
Same.
Michael Maune. Appreciate your time today. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye? Is there any place you'd want to point people to who want to learn more? I guess obviously there are resources on the Stoic Fellowship website that we mentioned, the Facilitators Guide and the upcoming, well, I guess the upcoming Facilitators Guide and the Practicum how-to sheets already up there, right?
Yep.
Anywhere else you want to point people to?
There are great guides we also put up like how to hold a Stoic meeting, so meeting format guides. You check out, my role at the Stoic Fellowship has been the resource page, and I haven't added much recently because I did like a huge reorganization of the whole thing. I think it's pretty good. I didn't add a lot to it in terms of content, but what we have there is very useful. And so if you want help on how to, run and organize a stoa, check out our resources page. There's a lot of great stuff there.
All right. Well, Michael, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.